We started this cycle of classes in August 2009. And we've passed the middle of it, but we've come somehow to a kind of middle here. We've seen the whole story of King Asvapati's quest, and then the birth and childhood of Savitri, her growing up, being her father sending her out to find her destined partner, and how she travels, and finally one day in the forest she and Shraddhavan come face to face. We just finished reading the Book of Love. And at the end of the Book of Love, Savitri says, now I must go back to my father's palace, but very soon I will be back here again, and we won't ever part again as long as we live. So we have come to Book 6, the Book of Fate. It has just 2 cantos, but this is a very crucial book in the whole poem. And last week we just made a start. We read and looked at the first 16 lines of Canto 1. Sri Aurobindo is introducing us to a new character, the character of Narad. Narad is a kind of half-divine person, or a human being who has become divine, and who can travel freely between Vishnu's heaven and the earth. And he's a devotee of Vishnu. He sings, he's a musician and a singer, and he's always chanting praises of his Lord. And usually when he comes to earth, it's for some kind of intervention, some kind of work that needs to be done. So now in this first section, 120 lines, Sri Aurobindo is describing the arrival, the coming down of Narad from those higher planes into the material universe, onto the earth, and coming to King Asvapati's palace. A teacher in the ashram has written a book about these 120 lines. Professor Deshpande has written a book called Narad's Arrival in Madra. And that's quite a fat book. It's 250 pages, something like that. So there are many interesting things to look at in this passage. Below him, circling, burned the myriad suns. He bore the ripples of the Etheric Sea. A primal air brought the first joy of touch. A secret spirit drew its mighty breath, contracting and expanding this huge world in its formidable circuit through the void. The secret might of the creative fire displayed its triple power to build and form, its infinitesimal wave sparks weaving dance, its nebulous units grounding shape and mass, magic foundation and pattern of a world, its radiance bursting into the light of stars. He felt a sap of life, a sap of death. Into solid matter's dense communion plunging, and its obscure oneness of forms, he shared with a dumb spirit identity. He beheld the cosmic being at his task. His eyes measured the spaces, gauged the depths. His inner gaze, the movements of the soul. He saw the eternal labor of the gods and looked upon the life of beasts and men. A change now fell upon the singer's mood. A rapture and a pathos moved his voice. He sang no more of light that never wanes, and oneness and pure everlasting bliss. He sang no more the deathless heart of love. His chant was a hymn of ignorance and fate. He sang the name of Vishnu and the birth and joy and passion of the mystic world, and how the stars were made and life began, and the mute regions stirred with the throb of a soul. He sang the inconscient and its secret self, its power omnipotent, knowing not what it does, all shaping without will or thought or sense, its blind, unerring, occult mystery. And darkness yearning towards the eternal light, and love that broods within the dim abyss and awaits the answer of the human heart, and death that climbs to immortality. He sang of the truth that cries from night's blind deeps, and the mother wisdom hid in nature's breast, and the idea that through her dumbness works, and the miracle of her transforming hands, of life that slumbers in the stone and sun, and mind subliminal in mindless life, and the consciousness that wakes in beasts and men. He sang of the glory and marvel still to be born, of Godhead throwing off at last its veil, of bodies made divine and life made bliss, immortal sweetness clasping immortal might, heart sensing heart, thought looking straight at thought, and the delight when every barrier falls, and the transfiguration and the ecstasy. And as he sang, the demons wept with joy, foreseeing the end of their long, dreadful task, and the defeat for which they hoped in vain, and glad release from their self-chosen doom, and return into the one from whom they came. I think we'll pause there. That will be enough for us for today. Will you begin, Edita?
Below him, circling, burned the myriad suns. He bore the ripples of the Etheric Sea. A primal air brought the first joy of touch. A secret spirit drew its mighty breath, contracting and expanding this huge world in its formidable circuit through the world.
Let's pause there. Narad is passing from mind, the mind worlds, into material things. And as he does so, as he crosses over that borderline, he sees below him the whole universe spread out, circling all the thousands and thousands of suns.
So it's material universe, no?
Yes. But where he is, he's above that. He sees it below him. He has to pass through several levels until he comes into the world of matter. He has to pass through 5 levels, in fact. First of all, the Etheric Sea. In Sanskrit, this is Akash, the subtlest of the elements. Ether. Our materialist scientists have proved to themselves that ether doesn't exist, but Shraddhavan refers to ether throughout the poem, and probably one day they will discover that it does exist after all. But it's perhaps not really material. Shraddhavan has written somewhere in his commentaries on the Upanishads that all these elements, these traditional 5 elements of ether, air, fire, earth, water, earth, that they don't exist in our material world in a pure form, any of them. That everything here is a mixture containing all the 5 elements in different proportions. So, but anyway, the subtlest of them is the ether. So he's in this vast ocean of ether. He can feel the ripples, the little waves on that ocean. And then he comes into this primal air, which is not this mixed element that we breathe, but the original air, vayu. And the characteristic of that air is that it allows touch, contact, friction. And in that level, there's a secret spirit breathing, drawing its mighty breath. And that breath breathing in and breathing out. This is contracting and expanding this huge world, this huge material world in its formidable circuit through the void, through the emptiness. It's circling, the whole universe is circling through not exactly what we call space, through emptiness. Sergei, would you read?
its infinitesimal waste parts, living dance, its nebulous units, grounding shape and mass, magic foundation and pattern of the world, its radiance bursting into the light of stars. He felt a set of life, a set of death, into solid matters, dense communion, larger, and its obscure oneness of forms. He shared with a dark spirit identity.
Thank you. So next he encounters the fire element, the creative fire, this secret power of fire, which has, Sri Aurobindo says, a triple power, a threefold power to build and form. It's with fire that the first shapes and forms are manifested. So again, there's a very interesting talk of Sri Aurobindo with Pavitra, one of Mother's early French disciples who came here in 1926, I think, and who was a physicist and a chemist. And Sri Aurobindo spoke to him about this triple power of fire. And he said that the scientists haven't yet discovered the third power of fire. And when they will discover it, he said they will be able to understand gravity. But so far they don't really understand gravity. But that talk was in 1927. Perhaps things have changed since then. But he says that it's the fire that has this dance, this weaving dance of infinitesimal, tiny, tiny, tiny little sparks of light. These must be photons, I suppose. And they come in waves, but they're also sparks, they're also particles. These are the units of this fire power, and they form the basis for material forms, for mass, which is the characteristic of matter. So those dancing atoms, the subatomic particles, these are the magic foundation and pattern. They form the underlying pattern of a world. And that power of fire, it also has this power of heat and energy, its radiance that bursts out into the light of stars. Perhaps these are three different forms, no? The wave sparks, three different aspects of that power. The wave sparks, the units, and the radiance. And then he feels a sap of life, a sap of death. Sap is the juice that flows in the plants. So it's a liquid. This is the liquid form. This is that liquid in us which carries life and brings death.
It's used in the sense of essence also, no? Sap. Right?
Yes, it is something essential to life, yes, yes. So, and then he plunges really into dense matter. He communicates with the substance of matter itself, plunges into it and into this world of forms. The forms are many, and yet they are in a way all one, because matter is one. And he shares identity, he identifies with a dumb spirit, the spirit in matter which can't express itself, which can't speak. Suresh, would you read?
He beheld the cosmic being at his first. His eyes measured the space,
Gauged.
gauged the depths. His inner gaze, the movement of the soul. He saw the eternal labor of the God and looked upon the light beats and light.
So first, Sri Aurobindo says, he beheld, he saw. He could see the cosmic being, the being, the spirit of the universe, doing its work, supporting all this. His eyes measured the spaces of this universe and gauged the depths. When you gauge something, you measure it. A gauge also is an instrument for measuring things. So this is, we can say, the eyes that can see the physical world, and his inner gaze gauged, saw and measured the movements of the soul in the cosmos, in the universe. So he sees this eternal labor of the gods, the cosmic powers that are maintaining the universe, trying to lift it towards the light. And he can also look upon the life of beasts, of animals, and human beings. So he can see everything that's going on in the universe. Would you read?
A change now fell upon the singer's mood. A rapture and a pathos moved his voice. He sang no more of light that never rains, and wholeness and pure everlasting bliss. He sang no more the deathless heart of love. His charm was a hymn of ignorance and fate.
So at the beginning he was chanting, no? Chanting, Narad, the heavenly sage from paradise, came chanting through the large and lustrous air. And here Sri Aurobindo tells us that when he was chanting, he was singing of the love, the light that never wanes, the deathless light, the shadowless light. And he was singing about pure everlasting bliss and the deathless heart of love. This was the theme of his praise and adoration to Vishnu. But now that he's come down into the material plane, he doesn't sing like that anymore. A change now fell upon the singer's mood. And there's a kind of rapture, an intense ecstasy, but at the same time a pathos. Pathos is when there is sadness and sorrow. So those two things are there in his voice. Instead of the light that never fades, the pure everlasting bliss, the deathless heart of love. Instead, his chant becomes a hymn, a sacred song of ignorance and fate. These are two of the powers that are controlling the material world. Yes.
He sang the name of Vishnu and the birth and joy and passion of the mystic world, and how the stars were made and life began, and the mute regions stirred with the throb of soul.
Thank you. Now we'll pause there at the full stop. So he's starting at the top. He's starting with Vishnu and how this world, this mysterious, mystic world, has come into birth, how it has been born, how the stars were made, how life began, how a soul has moved into these mute regions, these silent regions of dumb space, material space. Now they are stirring with the throb, like the beat of a heart, but this is the throb of a soul. Joy and passion. Joy is, we know joy, passion is suffering and intensity of feeling. How all this has come about. Mahalingam.
He sang the inconscient and its secret self, its power omnipotent, knowing not what it does, all shaping without will or thought or sense, its blind, unerring occult mystery, and darkness yearning towards the eternal light, and love that broods within the dim abyss, and weighs the answer of the human heart, and death that claims to immortality.
So this is what he sings about next. First he sang about the origin, the birth. Now he speaks about the inconscient and the secret self of this inconscient, where there seems to be no consciousness at all. That self of the inconscient has omnipotent power, but that power doesn't have consciousness. It doesn't know what it's doing. And yet it shapes everything in this material world. All shaping. It shapes everything, and it does that without any will or thought or senses even. It's just shaping everything in a very mysterious way. He says it's blind, unerring, occult mystery. How does the inconscient do all that so perfectly? It is blind, and yet it is unerring. It never makes a mistake. It's a hidden, an occult mystery.
Is this because of the creative fire? This triple power?
That's one of the ways in which it expresses itself, I suppose. But if we really want to go into Sri Aurobindo's explanation of how the inconscient works, there's a wonderful paragraph in the Life Divine where he explains it exactly, that the inconscient is just like the supreme existence with all its consciousness and power and delight, but because it's cut itself off from the consciousness, all that works blindly. But all the potentialities that are there in the supreme are there in the inconscient, but it works in darkness. And that's somehow the beginning of the process of evolution. So in that darkness, there's a yearning, a longing towards the eternal light. And that's what starts to drive the process of evolution, that yearning that's in the heart of the darkness. And the fact that love is there. Love has also involved itself, descended into the inconscient, sleeping there, radiating its light, but it's brooding, it's in a kind of trance state there within that dim abyss, and it's waiting for the response of the human heart. When the human heart can come in touch with that love which is brooding there in the dim abyss, then the whole process of evolution will be accelerated. And another feature of the inconscient is death. In fact, it seems like a state of death. No? But that death is climbing up through the evolutionary levels to a state of immortality. So that's his second song, when he speaks about the start from the inconscient and what is involved there, the powers that are involved there, and this upward movement towards the eternal light and immortality. Gumsun, would you read next?
Yes. He sang with the truth that Christ from night is blind the deeps, and the mother wisdom giving nature's bliss, and the idea that through her dumbness rose, and the miracle over her transforming hands, of life that slumbers in the storm and song, and mind sovereignly in mindless life, and the consciousness that works in beast and man.
So, in those blind depths, deep places of the inconscient, of the night of unconsciousness, there's a truth calling. And there's the wisdom of the Supreme Mother is at work in the breast, in the heart of nature, the nature force. There's an idea, the creative idea which has given rise to this whole process of involution and evolution. That is working through the dumbness of what we call nature, that original wisdom and the force of that idea, that creative idea that's been, as it were, encoded into all of us, into this whole universal unfolding. And that mother wisdom, she has the power to transform. She's shaping everything miraculously. So things do unfold. Life is already there in the stone and in the sun, but it has to emerge. No? Mind is already there in mindless life, in all these little amoebas and viruses and this and that. Mind is already there, because these are forms of the consciousness that first begins to wake up in animals and in men. And then he sings of the future. Till, would you read?
He sang of the glory and marvel still to be born, of Godhead
thrown off at last its veil, of bodies made divine, and life made bliss. Immortal sweetness clasping immortal might, heart sensing heart, thought looking straight at thought, and the delight when every barrier falls, and the transfiguration and the ecstasy.
So this is the next phase of his song. What will be, the glory and the marvel still to be born of the inner divinity throwing off its veil, revealing itself, of the divine life, of bodies made divine and life made bliss. And this means that immortal sweetness, that sweetness of the lover and the beloved, will clasp and embrace and unite with immortal might, strength and power. In our world at the moment, sweetness too often doesn't have much power. No? But here they are become equal. And then there will be this possibility of direct communication from heart to heart, from mind to mind, and we will be able to experience the delight of union when all the barriers and all the separation fall away. Then will come about the transfiguration. This word is similar in meaning to transformation, but transformation can mean simply change from one form into another. Now, the prince becomes transformed into a frog, and maybe back again if he's lucky. But transfiguration is when things are able to put on their divine forms, their perfect forms. So then will come about the transfiguration and the ecstasy of that discovery. And
Transfiguration.
there's an episode in the New Testament of the Bible, yes, where some of the disciples, Christ goes up to the top of the mountain with two of his disciples, and the others standing below see them divinized in divine forms. But then he comes down and he resumes his ordinary human form. Joel?
And as he sang, the demons wept with joy, foreseeing the end of their long dreadful task, and the defeat for which they hoped in vain, and glad release from their self-chosen doom, and return into the one from whom they came.
So this is lovely, isn't it? The sound of his song, his song of the future, as he sang. The demons, the forces who have committed themselves to evil, they wept with joy because he shows them the possibility of the end of this task that they've been performing for such a very, very long time, so many eons. And apparently they've been hoping to be defeated by the divine. In the Indian tradition, there is something like this, that at the point of creation, the Lord asks the beings who are around him there in his highest heaven, who will go and play this role of being the demons. And they will have the experience of being reabsorbed into the divine. So some of his closest devotees they volunteer for this long, dreadful task. Because that defeat by the divine, by the Supreme, will mean the glad release. They will be released, they'll be set free from that doom which they have chosen, they have accepted. But when they experience that release, they'll be able to return into the one from whom they came. So looking forward to that, they weep with joy when they hear Narad's song. Mihong?
He who has conquered the immortal seeds came down to men on earth, the man divine.
It's a short sentence, but anyway, let it be. So this is Narad. He's a human being, but he has conquered the immortal seats. He's gained the state of immortality. He can move freely between heaven and earth. And now he's coming down to men on earth as a divine human being, a divinized human being. So then there's a description of him coming. Shiv?
As darts a lightning streak, the glory fell, nearing until the rapt eyes of the sage looked out from luminous cloud and strangely limp. His face, beautiful mask of antique joy, appearing in light, descended where arose King Aswapati's palace in the winds in Madra, flowering up in delicate stone.
Madra is the name of King Aswapati's state, his country, and his city. So Sri Aurobindo really visualizes it, no? Of Narad coming down like perhaps a meteor, a lightning streak. This glory fell. It comes nearer and nearer until a face appears. The rapt eyes of the sage, of Sage Narad, looked out from a luminous cloud. He's surrounded by a luminous cloud. And somehow outlined, drawn, strangely limbed. This word means drawn, outlined. His face is a beautiful mask of antique joy. There are certain ancient sculptures which show faces which have a very, very special kind of smile, of delight. So something like that is his face. It's a mask, it's something he puts on now as he comes down to earth, but it's very beautiful. So that face appears in light, and it comes further down, comes down and down, where King Aswapati's palace rises up to the winds. It's, I think it is not in the mountains, it's more in the lowlands, Madra, and it's nice in the hot summer if you can go up into your wind tower where it's very nice and cool and pleasant all year round. So the palace is in Madra, and it flowers up in delicate stone. What a wonderful description. It's so beautifully carved in stone, elaborate, delicate, like a flower, blossoming. Bhavana?
Then welcome him, the sweet and thoughtful king. At his side, a creature beautiful, passionate, wise, aspiring like a sacrificial flame, scurrying from its earth sea through luminous air, Queen blows, the human mother of Savitri.
Thank you. So, a few lines up in line 79, it says, the rapt eyes of the sage, the wise man. Here we have the same word used as an adjective. The king, King Asvapati, is sage, he is wise, and he is thoughtful. He welcomes Narad, and at his side, at the side of the king, as he welcomes Narad, is his queen. In the traditional legend of Savitri, there's no mention at all of the queen. Sri Aurobindo has introduced this character, the human mother of Savitri. Perhaps her name might be mentioned in the traditional story, but that's all. But he gives her quite an important part in the story, in this book, in book 6. So here he introduces her. She's beautiful, she's passionate, she's capable, she's not a boring, dull sort of person. She's capable of intense feeling and intense expression. She's wise, and she's also full of aspiration. And as she sits there next to him, she looks like a flame of the fire of sacrifice, moving upwards from its altar, its seat on the earth, up to the skies through luminous air. So he shows her as a very outstanding person, the mother of Savitri, queen-browed. She looks like a queen, the human mother of Savitri. Ganga Lakshmi?
They, for an hour untouched by the earth's
Siege.
They
ceased. They ceased
from common life and care and thought, inclining the right and rhythmic voice, while in his measure chant the ABC, spoke on the thoughts of men and what the gods strive from on earth and joy that runs behind the marvel and the mystery of death.
So they sit and listen to him for some time. And while he sings, it seems as if they don't feel besieged anymore by the concerns of earth. They are taken out of common life, ordinary life, away from its anxieties. The two of them sat inclining, leaning towards, listening to that wonderful voice, high and rhythmic voice. And the sage chants a measured chant, rhythmic. And in this song, he speaks about the toils, the labor, the suffering of men, and what the gods are striving for on earth. What are they trying to bring about? And he speaks about that joy which is always there, throbbing behind all the pain. And Sri Aurobindo has this wonderful line, the marvel and the mystery of pain. And that's going to be a theme of this book. So Narad is deliberately choosing to sing this song to them. They don't know that pain is coming to them, but he knows. He's come to bring it, you can say, to do his mischief. But actually, of course, there's a divine purpose behind it. Nina.
He sang to them of the lotus heart of love, with all its thousand luminous buds of truth, which covering sleeps while apparent things.
Thank you. So, another thing that he sings to them about is the love, which is like a lotus. The lotus is supposed to have 1,000 petals. No? And here he says, this lotus heart of love has 1,000 buds, 1,000 luminous buds of truth, as if true love expresses itself in the form of truth, of something true, many varied truths. That lotus heart of love is sleeping, waiting to open, quivering, veiled, hidden by apparent things, all these things that we see. But behind them, quivering, ready to open up, is this beautiful heart of love.
It trembles at each touch. It strives to wake, and one day it shall hear the blissful voice, and in the garden of the spouse shall bloom, when she is seized by the discovered love.
So that lotus heart of love is sleeping, but it trembles, it responds at each touch. It tries to wake up. And one day it will hear the voice that it's waiting for, that voice that's bringing bliss. And it will bloom, it will open completely in the garden of the spouse, the bride, when she is seized by her discovered Lord. When the prince comes and embraces the princess, then she can wake up from her enchanted sleep. No? Something like that is the image. So the Lord is the Lord of love, the spouse probably is nature. But of course, we are going to hear a love story now also, so it is all of these things together. Rosa.
A mighty shuddering coil of ecstasy crept through the deep mouth of the universe, out
Yes, go on.
of her mother's
Matters.
Stupor, her mind's dreams, she woke, she looked upon God's universe,
Unveiled.
unveiled face.
So as he sings this wonderful song about the lotus heart of love, it's as if there's a quiver, a shudder, moving, a coil of ecstasy passes through the deep heart of the universe, the whole material universe. And that spirit of the universe wakes up out of the stupor of matter. Stupor is when you are in a kind of drugged state. You're unconscious, you can't wake up. So matter might be something like that. But now she wakes up. She wakes up also out of the dreams of the mind. She wakes up and she sees God's unveiled face. The face is no longer hidden. She can really see. So this implies that Narad's song has the power of a revelation and transformation. And this is told also about the Greek musician Orpheus, that when he sang, he also had a lyre. Narad has a lyre. Then the trees could speak and move, and the animals could understand what he's singing. Shall we read? Shall we read the whole of this section? So this is Book 6, the Book of Fate, and Canto 1, the Word of Fate. Below him, circling, burned the myriad suns. He bore the ripples of the Etheric Sea. A primal air brought the first joy of touch. A secret spirit drew its mighty breath, contracting and expanding this huge world in its formidable circuit through the void. The secret might of the creative fire displayed its triple power to build and form. Its infinitesimal wave sparks weaving dance, its nebulous units grounding shape and mass, magic foundation and pattern of a world. Its radiance bursting into the light of stars. He felt a sap of life, a sap of death. Into solid matter's dense communion plunging, and its obscure oneness of forms. He shared with a dumb spirit identity. He beheld the cosmic being at his task. His eyes measured the spaces, gauged the depths. His inner gaze the movements of the soul. He saw the eternal labor of the gods and looked upon the life of beasts and men. A change now fell upon the singer's mood. A rapture and a pathos moved his voice. He sang no more of light that never wanes, and oneness and pure everlasting bliss. He sang no more the deathless heart of love. His chant was a hymn of ignorance and fate. He sang the name of Vishnu and the birth and joy and passion of the mystic world, and how the stars were made and life began, and the mute regions stirred with the throb of a soul. He sang the inconscient and its secret self, its power omnipotent, knowing not what it does, all shaping without will or thought or sense, its blind, unerring, occult mystery. And darkness yearning towards the eternal light, and love that broods within the dim abyss, and waits the answer of the human heart, and death that climbs to immortality. He sang of the truth that cries from night's blind deeps, and the mother wisdom hid in nature's breast, and the idea that through her dumbness works, and the miracle of her transforming hands, of life that slumbers in the stone and sun, and mind subliminal in mindless life, and the consciousness that wakes in beasts and men. He sang of the glory and marvel still to be born, of Godhead throwing off at last its veil, of bodies made divine and life made bliss, immortal sweetness clasping immortal might, heart sensing heart, thought looking straight at thought, and the delight when every barrier falls, and the transfiguration and the ecstasy. And as he sang, the demons wept with joy, foreseeing the end of their long dreadful task, and the defeat for which they hoped in vain, and glad release from their self-chosen doom, and return into the one from whom they came. He who has conquered the immortal seats came down to man on earth, the man divine. As darts a lightning streak, a glory fell, nearing until the rapt eyes of the sage looked out from luminous cloud, and strangely limbed, his face a beautiful mask of antique joy, appearing in light, descended where arose King Asvapati's palace to the winds, in Madra, flowering up in delicate stone. There welcomed him the sage and thoughtful king. At his side a creature beautiful, passionate, wise, aspiring like a sacrificial flame skyward from its earth seat through luminous air. Queen-browed, the human mother of Savitri. There, for an hour untouched by the earth's siege, they ceased from common life and care, and sat inclining to the high and rhythmic voice, while in his measured chant the heavenly seer spoke of the toils of men and what the gods strive for on earth, and joy that throbs behind the marvel and the mystery of pain. He sang to them of the lotus heart of love, with all its 1,000 luminous buds of truth, which quivering sleeps, veiled by apparent things. It trembles at each touch, it strives to wake, and one day it shall hear a blissful voice, and in the garden of the spouse shall bloom, when she is seized by her discovered Lord. A mighty shuddering coil of ecstasy crept through the deep heart of the universe. Out of her matter's stupor, her mind's dreams, she woke. She looked upon God's unveiled face.